Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Su-Ling Ching, and it is my honor to be the President and CEO of the Ottawa Board of Trade. Welcome this afternoon to the CEO Talk series. This event, presented twice a year in partnership with the Ottawa Business Journal and the Ottawa Board of Trade, the CEO Talk series provides a chance to tap into considerable expertise from world-class business leaders, to hear about lessons learned, best practices, and to better understand the opportunities that they see in the future. We are thrilled today to be joined by Kathryn Tremblay, CEO and co-founder of excelHR, and we are especially honored to have Komal Minhas here to lead this conversation. As we continue to celebrate women leaders in our community during the month of March, both of these women are great examples of leadership and advocates for equality. The Board of Trade is committed to advancing women as a key economic driver for our community and our country by inspiring women to step fully into their power, by creating opportunities such as today to facilitate community conversations around equality and advocating for policies and programs that move the needle on issues such as diversity and inclusion and gender equality. Thank you to each of you and our generous sponsors for making this event possible. Please help me by recognizing, returning as our series sponsor, Algonquin College. Thank you to President Claude Brulé and your team at Algonquin for helping us support diversity in our community. And to our global partner, Oakwood Designers and Builders, thank you to Chuck Smith and your whole team for supporting us as well. You can connect today about today's event beyond this room on social media using our hashtag @CEOTalk. Now, about the Board of Trade, it is our mission to create prosperity through advocacy, economic development, and leadership. We do this by helping our businesses grow through cost savings, brand and business promotion, and providing education and information. And most importantly, we partner with business and community leaders to advocate at all three levels of governments for program and policies that inspire growth, innovation, and community health. This work has certainly been amplified over this past year as we work together to mitigate the countermeasures of COVID. I wish to commend and thank all of our member businesses, volunteers, and stakeholders for your radical collaboration and your resiliency now and as we prepare for a solid rebound, healthy, safe, and growing economically. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Komal Minhas. Please welcome Komal.
Hi,
hello. Hello, so nice to see you.
So good to see you. Also, it hurts my brain that the last time we did this was in a stadium full of people.
Full of thousands of people. So I'm going to share a little bit about you, dear. Komal is the founder of Carciva Company, a company focused on building individual and societal resilience through training programs, media production, and investing. She curates powerful experiences and conversations as an interviewer, educator, investor, and champion known for women globally. And for this work, she was named to Oprah Winfrey's, I just say Oprah because who else is there? Oprah Winfrey's Super Soul 100 list. Komal is the host of talk show Lessons Learned, where she leverages her varied life and business experiences and background as a journalist to deeply connect with her guests and global audience on topics of resilience. Certainly, you must be busy these days. A recent career highlight for Komal was interviewing former First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama, in front of an audience of 8,000 for Mrs. Obama's Canadian Stadium Tour. And that was a wonderful event, and you did a beautiful job. As a resilience educator, Komal trains individuals through her virtual programs to better understand their own strengths, and capacity as they work to transform the systems we live in. Komal will be joined by Kathryn Tremblay for a candid chat about lessons learned, best practices, and the opportunities they see in the future. Let's welcome Kathryn to our group. Hello, Kathryn.
Hi.
I'd love
Nice to see you.
Wonderful to see you. Thank you for being here. I'm going to just say a few words of introduction. So, hello, Kathryn. Kathryn is a Canadian entrepreneur with over 30 years specializing in the human aspect of human resources. As CEO and co-founder, of excelHR, which is an affiliate of Altus Recruitment. Kathryn has dedicated her entire career toward the betterment of the staffing process. With offices in Ottawa, Toronto, and Vancouver, employers from coast to coast rely on excelHR for recruitment services, thought leadership, and consultative HR support across industries and disciplines. A champion of people, Kathryn regularly serves as a career ambassador to new Canadians by offering opportunities for professional growth within her firm. She also provides one-on-one coaching to support young women in achieving their academic dreams and is a proud supporter of many community-minded organizations. Kathryn holds a Bachelor of Commerce degree from the University of Ottawa and is fluent in French. And so I just want to thank you both for being here and to share with our audience that even as we were preparing for this event, I myself learned so much. And so I'm so excited for everyone who's watching today, and I'll turn it over to the both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Su-Ling. Kathryn, I'm so looking forward to our conversation today. It's been really wonderful to dive deeper into your story and to learn more about you in my research for our conversation today. And the impact that you've had nationally through excelHR and Altus has been immense. And it didn't just happen by chance. And so I want to go back to the early days and the influences that helped you become who you are today. And during this pandemic, we have seen the disproportionate load and workload of unpaid labor, domestic labor, mothering that women are doing right now. And when I think of my own mother in my upbringing, she worked part-time at the hospital and then was a stay-at-home mom part-time as well. And she did that intentionally to better support my brother and I and my cousins alongside my aunt who worked similarly because we all lived together back in the day. And that was an intentional choice by her because she knew the importance of her involvement in our upbringing. And right now we're seeing this disproportionate load on women. And that the economy literally would not function without this unpaid labor, this unpaid domestic labor, and what mothering actually entails, parenting actually entails. And so I wonder for you, you talk about your mother and the role she had on your upbringing. How did she help cultivate your ambition and drive?
Oh, that's such a beautiful question. And I didn't see it coming. I thought you were going a different way. And to talk about my mother is one of the most joyous things I could ever do because she is 76 and she has a beautiful joy and gratitude for life. And when I was growing up, if I got up in a slightly bad mood, she was the type who would close my door and pull my blind down and say, get back to bed. When you get up, I want to see a different you transformed here today. And we're not dealing with that. We're dealing with the positivity that you're going to bring for the day. If there was a sunset that was attractive, she would be, get over here, boys. I had two brothers, and she'd say, come and see the sunset. Let's appreciate, what is in front of us. And she was very spiritual. And further, and more importantly, she really believed in me. And when anything would go wrong in my life in any way, and certainly I've had, various times in life that have been more difficult, and she would be that person who always showed up for me, always showed up. And she would say, whatever that hardship is, I believe in you and you've got this. And when I wanted to work full time as a mom with 4 children, she was the person who would say, let me step in and help you with the smallest task is the most important task. And I always said yes to the help. It would be, can I sew the name on the hockey jersey for one of the girls, or can I take them to one of their appointments? I've had a daughter with a learning disability. I have a daughter who has depression, and she was the person who just jumped in and was like, how can I help? How can I be part of this? And the love that she has for my children is really stupendous. So there's just that kind of like yourself, where you were raised with your family. She participated, as my dad did as well, in rearing my family. So there's so much to say there.
And when you think back to how seeing her work in the home may have influenced you and the path that you're on today, The reason I bring this up is because we're having a lot of kids at home right now who are witnessing the dynamics and workload, the influences that come with the way certain our parents are showing up or how our parents are showing up. And so I wonder the impact that seeing how your mom showed up for you and your siblings influenced this ambition that's been cultivated in you and this drive that's been cultivated in you.
Well, the drive stems from the entire family and the dynamic that we had. We were very fortunate to be raised in an environment where, my dad was very present to us. My mom and dad spoke with us, expecting from us. And it was a different time. There was no social media. I was a very sensitive little girl, and things certainly bothered me growing up. And, there was no judgment for emotion. Like whatever you were going through, it was okay to, take part in that. So you're talking about today in COVID times and families at home. And it is a difficult time. I mean, any parent you're talking with, there's everything around video and trying to unglue from TikTok and everything else. And so I think parents are going through something completely distinct right now that I don't think we can compare to the time that I grew up to right now under COVID, where children don't know if they're going to school the next day. They don't know. Imagine sitting quietly behind a screen as an 8-year-old rambunctious child, So, for parents, that's obviously very difficult. And I think the only thing we can do for each other is show up, be there. How can I help with, someone's anything? Either it's groceries. We've had some of our own kids do coaching for other children in our company, where we assigned like a teenager to a child and said, okay, you're now like a coach mentor. So that some of them are doing karate, and the next one is learning how to make virgin drinks, and the next one is doing something, a craft. So it's kind of finding ways to create little communities and paths in this unusual time.
And when you're looking at it from an HR perspective, what have been some best practices you've seen in supporting working parents during this time?
Well, for us as an organization, we saw that we had never really faced very high emotional health issues in our company. We'd always had this, fairly strong stability in that way. And during COVID, and very quickly, we saw all the emotions that I would say everyone is facing around fear and anxiety, uncertainty, isolation, and all of those elements, show up. And so we had to change our practices pretty much wholesale, but in a good way. The whole work from home for us has been transformative. I wish I had gone there earlier. I didn't see how incredibly powerful it could be for someone to have choice, and that it really does create a new employer-employee trust that, I used to, being in business 32 years, I imagined that a culture was only built on seeing each other and on eyeballing each other, but that's actually not really accurate. So in transforming, the company today is really about the emotional health of everyone. And for women in particular, and for moms, it really is about flexibility. We've seen some of the moms in our company just completely change the way they work in terms of their hours. Some of them might log off at 3 and, make dinner and be powerful for their children, and then log back on for an hour here or there. Or maybe they've changed the way they work with their spouse, and, they're interplaying that. Or sometimes in our Zoom calls, there might be a child or a dog, a puppy, a whole family right there with them. And, it's different. There's more noise, there's more conversation. However, I don't know if there's ever been a time where I've gotten to know my team members better. I see the children, fly in and pull their mom's, headset off their head, or, come in and ask for snacks, including my own kids, by the way. And sometimes you feel slightly in that moment annoyed for 4 seconds, and you're like, oh, this is pretty cool. It gives the person who I'm talking with, let's say it was you could get to know my family, and there's something really kind of charming about that.
And it's also been a time of self-exploration, as much as we haven't had time to necessarily like self-reflect, because things have been so busy, even though we are confined and life is slower in different ways. But what have you learned about yourself through this journey of this pandemic life, both as a leader, as a mother, as a friend?
Oh, as a leader, I would say that I have learned to always show up as my authentic self, but there's never been a time that hasn't been relied on a little bit more than ever. Where, if I'm having a tough day, or one of my kids is. It's all part of one journey and one life together, and showing up to my team members with who I am. And this is what I have for you. I would say as a leader, we've had to transform a lot of our leadership practices around not leading as a group, but leading the individual. Because every person right now has such a different path, and there's so much more vulnerability, as you referred to earlier, the vulnerability of everything going on in people's homes. And so by me transforming, it allows our leaders and our team members to transform. And I think the conversations are a lot more real, and there is less guardedness. And I hope that that will stay. So as a change as a leader, I would like to continue seeing that kind of individual leadership over that group idea. As a mother, I speak to my children every day, and I think we talk more openly now than ever before, because we're having to explore the notion of isolation, a wedding being canceled, just dealing with all of it, not having a graduation, but then understanding that our world is so much bigger than what we experience. The small thing of, oh, I didn't have a graduation is a big thing to the 18-year-old who's not having, the prom. On the other hand, if we look at our whole big world, we're so fortunate, to be in Canada, to be in Ottawa, to have, we have so much good around us, to focus on that. And then when you say as a friend, I think that's been the most challenging, because for me, showing up as a mom and a leader comes naturally, whereas showing up as a friend takes extra scheduling and time. And I don't know if you found this too, but in these pandemic times, it's carving out that moment to be there for someone who wants to chat or needs you. And it's hard to be relied on by everyone, because you want to be there for your parent, for your siblings, for your children, for your team members and your friends. And I have found that that's taxing a little bit, because it's hard to show up for everyone at all times at the highest of level. Would you agree?
I would agree wholeheartedly. And the only way I've been able to keep up with friendships has been group chats, and then like once a month touch bases with different groups. But I also don't have children myself, so there's a different bucket of time that I can pull from that perhaps others at different points in their careers and lives can't. But also in terms of your relationship with yourself, because this has been a time where we've learned a lot about ourselves. The time spent working from home, having to pivot our businesses, it's like you've said, or like Su-Ling shared, resilience is very on the nose right now for people. And, for the definition of resilience is how quickly we can bounce back from difficulty. But for me, it's the quickness isn't really important to me. It's the foundation we have in our lives to support us through difficulty. And this is something that I, by observation, would assume that you've had to cultivate over this last 5 years. Because a big part of the excelHR story was that you founded it with your husband, Tony. And that, back in 1989, when RBC gave you that first loan, the business was brought to life through a lot of grit, tenacity, hard work, and passion together with the man who was both your business partner and life partner. And so I wonder, there's a couple questions I have about this period of life, but the first is there's a lot of people who are closing their businesses now, but also opening and pursuing entrepreneurship. What was the impact of that first loan on the trajectory of your business? And what advice would you give to folks who are like very early in this journey and potentially adverse to wanting to take on that credit right now, or those loans or different things to start a business at this moment?
Oh, I love your questions, Komal. They're really, really special. I coach a few small companies as well that are trying to take off and just in that phase. And it's essential to acquire capital through others. I mean, I started with $750, I had to rely on others' capital, but I also needed coaching and mentoring around reinvesting in the business and not spending it. And so, to a new startup today, I would say keep going and do not let anyone doubt you. Don't let yourself doubt yourself. Don't let the pandemic doubt you. Just, keep very clear on your strategy and your goals and rely on other mentors and coaches. It's okay to say, what do you have to bring me? And so for the small companies that I work with, some of them with only 20,000 in revenue a month, which is not a lot to really, create something powerful. They actually need to hire, but they don't have the resources. And so we work on how it is that they're developing their very small amount of retained earnings in their business so that they can catapult from there. The thing I like about these organizations is that they all accept help. And when you say, can I help with your sales and marketing strategy? Do you want to talk about your HR plans? They accept the help. And I would say that for myself, I sought help. I asked others for input. When I needed money to support my payroll for Monday, I called my grandmother and she charged me interest but gave me a loan. I had university students. I was still in university when I started the business. I was only 21. And I borrowed from my friends. I'd be like, can you just, put some money in my bank for Monday? I'll pay you by Friday. And, I would recommend to a new startup today to be open to the support, ask for money, ask for help. And, if you're then there for others later, I've tried to bring this full circle for all those people that gave me free help. I hope that I can give it back in my small way today.
And I feel like you do that tenfold through your mentorship and through the work that you do just in HR through the company, and the free resources you create online for so many. I did a deep dive into the blogs and the videos, and it's been so useful for me from a research perspective for this conversation, but also from an HR perspective for my company.
I really believe in thought leadership, and I believe in giving it all away to anyone who needs it, because the more we give, the more it comes back in a different way. Maybe it doesn't come back, as a candidate or a client, but it comes back in some kind of like meaningful conversation. Even some of our competitors, because of the blog, have called me and said, I have this question about health and safety. What do you think? And we've had the conversation, and it changes something, because if we're all in it together, then our community will be stronger, which will create more jobs. And because I'm in the business of meaningful employment, the more jobs we can bring to Ottawa, it was amazing. I heard our mayor speak yesterday. He was speaking to my 14-year-old's class, and he said that 26 new people come to Ottawa and settle here every day.
Wow.
And I've been thinking about those 26 people and what's that journey for them? What's their home ownership? What's the business startup they might have? What is their diversity profile that might be affecting a barrier that they might be facing? And so as I was thinking about these 26 new Ottawans per day, what can we bring to that? What can you bring? What can I bring? We're both in the field of resilience. We're both in the field of giving back to our communities. And what does that look like? Something really interesting there.
It's really interesting and humanizing. We hear statistics, and you're in the business of statistics as well. And when we can see the humans behind those statistics, it can help evoke empathy.
Yes.
And Tony was one of those 26 Ottawans back in the day, if I'm not mistaken. And his journey and the way that you describe his upbringing, it was a difficult upbringing. And I'm curious what you learned through learning about his childhood, learning about his upbringing and his resilience, and what that taught you about empathy and resiliency in yourself.
Oh my goodness. I think that I should talk with you on a daily basis just to, have this opportunity to tell these really beautiful stories, because Tony was a powerful force in my life. We met when we were so young. We wanted to start a funeral home, couldn't find the capital, and so we end up, starting what we loved, which is staffing. And he had moved to Ottawa when he was 3 years old, and he was very disadvantaged, and he felt the pain of that. He felt it from, in his education, and feeling that he was disadvantaged, in how he looked or how he behaved or how he smelled or the food he brought to school. And he would talk about these pains that he had. And he carried those pains sometimes with him. And he was an amazing businessman, because he was creative, and he would push back on nothing was afraid. He wasn't afraid. He was kicked out of his home at 14. He was on student welfare. He knew what it felt like to have to really battle whatever it took to get to where he was going, and to ask for a reference letter to get into Queens, and to ask for someone to advocate for him. And so I think through his advocacy, he taught me that piece. So when we would show up, I was talking about this the other day to a business meeting, I had my edge as being the only woman in the room. So there'd be 10 men and me, and I'd have self-doubt. And he would come into the room with his self-doubt because of his disadvantaged youth. And he was an immigrant from Portugal, and he really did feel that. He was told in university, change your last name, you'll never make it with your last name, things like that. So we both had our little edge, and we would talk after. I don't think that's useful for us to have this edge. What could we do with this edge to turn it into success versus letting it define us? So kind of, it's our story. It happened to us. This happened, but transforming that story into something more meaningful. And I can't tell you how much I learned from him in that way, because he brought an intensity that was unlike most people. It was really special.
It's really interesting you say that, because my name's Komal Minhas, and someone said, you expect to be able to grow and scale with with that name, and I was like, it's what my
My name.
ancestors, my family, my mother gifted me. Yes, like this is how I belong in the world. And I appreciate how you talk about those edges. And when we look at, I actually learned this yesterday, when we look at where the concept of resiliency came from, it was actually through the study of children of color and how they come through difficulty. And this was done, I believe, in the 80s, a study, and the term resiliency was applied in that lens. And so when we look at, the things that require us to be resilient, especially for marginalized communities, it's usually a lack of social support or different, societal traumas. And these are things that we have seen come to the forefront in the last year, even more so than before. So when you consider the shifts you've seen in HR since the murder of George Floyd and the increase in conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion, what have you seen as best practices for true and wholesome and cross-company change to ensure that inclusion, equity, and diversity are truly priorities in companies?
This has been a really powerful force for me, Komal, because I think I would have started from that place where I thought, oh, we place 8,000 people a year, and therefore, we place all Canadians and all newcomers. And I had this idea that, in Canada, we don't have as much of an issue around systemic racism. And I'm sharing this with you because it's been one of the most moving things that has happened to me. And losing Tony to terminal cancer is the biggest thing that's ever happened to me. But I'm going to say that diversity has been my professional challenge that I didn't know I had. And with George Floyd's murder, the game changer there for me was I started asking a lot more questions that I had never felt comfortable asking because I didn't know I was allowed to ask those questions. So I called my son-in-law, who is a Black American, and said, "What's your experience been?" And he said, "Well, remember when we went to the beach and I changed my clothes so that I looked white because I was hanging with you guys." And, then I called one of my employees and they said, "I faced racism from this client." Well, these were things I hadn't been asking the questions. Once I asked and I saw and learned, I will tell you, for me, this has been a game changer. I almost feel like I don't know what my career was before when I didn't know how significant marginalization has been, or that the sting of racism is affecting people every single day, and that it changes what they become and how they become. And when you look at even entrepreneurship that you asked me about earlier, there are a lot less Black Canadians that own businesses. Why is that? If you look at Statistics Canada last year, for the first time, started to release data on unemployment associated with race in Canada. And you see very quickly through the numbers that Arab Canadians and South Asian Canadians and Black Canadians are affected much more by unemployment and joblessness. Add COVID to that. And, there is, a serious issue to contend with. So for me, I started out that journey of just learning. And it was a hard learn because it shook my confidence because I was so sure of myself in that, oh no, I don't have privilege, or like, I don't know what that is. And then realizing, oh no, I do have privilege. And I never knew that I was showing up with that privilege and that I had to change something and to be part of the change for my future grandchildren, or to be part of the change that Tony would have benefited from. And so we did a few things there. We improved our newcomer program. So we've been doing this for some time, but it was in honor of Tony and Canada's 150th birthday to really, celebrate the newcomer who says, "I don't have Canadian experience on my resume." So we do a paid work experience with us, and we help them with their resume, and we coach them to success. And we've had really, really good results from this. Results for the individual. It doesn't mean we place them. It just means that they land in a seat, and that's a changer for them because now they have the financial resources, and those financial resources affect their children, and it's a continuous wave. So to just complete the circle on diversity, because that was your question, is that I've really come to such an incredible place. I have 2 coaches, and I run things by them, and I do these little learning segments where I say, "This is what I was thinking. What do you see?" And those conversations have been moving for me because it's shown me the effect of racism, the effect of marginalization, and that I wasn't aware of some of those small barriers in our recruitment practices that I was unaware of. And when we started to dig in, so with our HR team, really going through every piece of our recruitment toolbox and seeing that they might be the smallest barriers, but those little barriers add up. And so we've been working, our current initiative right now is to reduce every segment of barrier that we can see so that we can make more advocacy with our clients. We can teach our team members. What we're seeing with our team is they're very interested in this subject, and that for other leaders that are listening today, I find the engagement from the millennial population, we always say, oh, millennials, oh my goodness, they're so passionate and excited about what the future could hold in diversity. And so we're finding the uptick in our company has been very moving. We haven't struggled with it. We've had a lot of positivity around seeking the change that we're talking about today.
And for the leaders who are watching and those who feel apprehensive because they don't know what they don't know, you have faced this, in, like you say, reckoning with your own privilege, learning what you don't know. How do you support yourself in moving through difficult conversations that can trigger you in that privilege? Because I know for a lot of leaders, this can be a barrier to keep them from actually reckoning and doing the hard work that's required to ensure DE&I is like at the forefront of a company, because that ego hit that we can get when it's like, what do you mean I've been living my life in a certain way and I've had this huge blind spot? That's a really big thing for folks to move through.
Komal, that definitely what you just said resonates with me completely, because in my own confidence, because I'm really self-confident and I'm bold and I assume, oh no, I'm good, I've got this. And to realize I didn't was actually hard on my ego, because you realize that blind spot that existed that whole time. And sometimes, the story that I've talked about with my children is that if I'm flying from Ottawa to Vancouver as a white person, from Vancouver back to Ottawa, it's only 4.5 hours because I've got tailwinds. But if I'm flying to Vancouver and I'm a Black Canadian, it's going to take me 5.5 hours. Why? Because I have headwinds, and it's recognizing what those headwinds are. What is that 20% difference? Why is it that the joblessness is higher, or that there are less Black-owned businesses? Why is that happening? And then when I saw the effect of it, one of the things we did this month, for example, is we did a Black-owned business guide. So we reached out far and wide across Canada, and we spotlighted over 100 companies, and we stayed in touch with them. And so now when we are, looking for prizes for a staff event, we're going to our Black-owned business guide, and we're looking for the opportunity to support the Black-owned business. And the participation has been incredible. So I think for me, it's been about parking my ego and recognizing that I did have a blind spot. Okay, now I have a coach. I'm working on what is my language? Who am I being? How am I showing up? Am I mistaken in a thought? And then in addition to that is just being in action, because it doesn't matter this whole performative allyship. I'm not here to perform. Even today talking with you, it's not a performance, it's real. It's what do we bring to the world? And I think that what I'm bringing to diversity is that I really mean it. And I'm seeing that happening in our own company with our candidates and with our clients. And there's just something different. George Floyd's murder is bringing something different to the world. And it's across North America, but certainly in Canada, it's a beautiful thing to see that we're even having this conversation today, and hopefully the other leader who's thinking, oh, maybe I don't want to do that, but maybe you do, just have the conversation. And once you see it, then you can be it. And then it changes things, and that it's not a performance, but that it comes from within, that allyship is from within. So I'm trying really hard in my own life, not to preach it, but to really be it,
And that embodiment is impacting not just your life, but again, the placement of 8,000 plus people that you've put in or help have hire across the country.
Yeah.
And that, it's important to note that when we talk about a blind spot and we realize the humanity behind that blind spot, and that it was death and it is difficulty and it is, very real difficulty and trauma for a lot of folks, that it just opens up a floodgate for possibility and more human connection. So there's a concept that really hit home for me. I'm a cancer survivor myself. And actually, before I dive into this question, I want to remind the audience, if you have a question, just type it into the chat function on whatever platform you're watching. If you have a question for Kathryn, I'll make sure to bring it in as we reach the end of our conversation together. But I watched this film, and it's a Will Smith movie. It's called Collateral Beauty.
Mhm.
And when we go through difficulty, which we all are right now, we've talked a lot about the mental health implications of the pandemic and the difficulty we're all facing. And, I've read about the low-grade PTSD many of us will face on the other side of this reality that we're in. But I lean back on my own experiences with adversity, which are littered across my 31 years, but most recently were the 3 years that I was unwell and had to recover, and the isolation I experienced, and the collateral beauty that came from that difficulty in those 3 years. So when you think of losing Tony, your life partner and your business partner, you talk often about the changes it led you to making in your life and your business. And I'd love to learn, as we all grapple with the hardship that we're facing right now, what that collateral beauty looked like in your life, in what was one of the most difficult periods of your life, and the silver linings it provided you in who you are today.
Well, as you experienced grief and, his journey when he was ill taught me a lot, because Tony nurtured friendships. And when I had, 4 kids to drive to activities, and I was running the business, and I had a lot of medical advocacy for him, he was really seeking to live. I mean, he was a fighter, and we worked so hard on this together. And so my days were just so full, and I would put out an email to all of his friends and say, is anyone able to come and hang out with Tony while I go do all those other things? And I had a Google spreadsheet, and 50 different people would sign up. And within an hour, I had the whole week filled of when I could deal with all of the things that I had to do. And so, when we talk about, PTSD, and I would say that Tony had a little bit of PTSD from his childhood, and that he brought that sometimes with him in the cancer journey. But what was beautiful about that is that he had overcome. And so I think that he believed that he could overcome cancer. And so the sadness of that grief is just, he brought such a light, and it's unfortunate that that light isn't here today. Now, transforming that, though, to what is beautiful about it, because you talked about Collateral Beauty. I've never seen the movie, but what a lovely question. The Collateral Beauty in my life was that I had built a lot of loyalty in my life, and the loyalty was with my family, the loyalty was with my friends, the loyalty was with my colleagues and leaders. And I found that everyone stepped up, but I accepted the help. So I will say that was a piece, but the Collateral Beauty was the beauty of everyone who was there for me. And I really hope that I can provide that in return to others, because our leaders were here transforming and creating for the business, and we grew in that period. Some of our processes improved. Like, I saw people bringing the best of themselves. So like COVID, it's like bringing the best of yourself in a time of pain. And I saw that with my friendships. I had a really close friend who said, hey, I'm doing a reno at home. I'm going to move in with you, with my kids and my dog. And they came and lived with me for 5 or 6 months. And the joy of living as a family was just so powerful, because I missed, my older daughters were away at school. Suddenly we found ourselves going from 6 people in a home to 3. It felt strangely lonely and unusual, and I had to refine my place as a mother. I had to find my voice as a business leader, and not hear Tony's voice, but hear only my own voice, so that I could continue and love the business as much as I do today, and maybe even more so, and the responsibility that I felt for the journey we had started together. So, when we talk about COVID and PTSD, I believe you're right that it's very real. This has been difficult on everyone, and it's a lot like grieving, isn't it? Like, look at the experience you had with your illness, and I commend you so much on how you've brought your entire 31-year history into resilience today, and even accepting to have this conversation. It really does change something for you and for me. And so this PTSD is that it's real, and recognize it, and also don't give it the space to own you, because there is something possible. And my business coach would always say to me, the future is unwritten. So that happened. COVID happened. It was terrible on everyone. We were lonely, we were isolated, we were fearful, some loss of jobs, loss of advancement, loss of all the things we've talked about. And we can still be powerful, and we can still be what the future is, and the thing that I learned, I'm sorry, I'm just going to say one more piece about that, is that this is not a practice life, right? We only have one shot at this thing. So in this one shot, okay, COVID is horrible, but then what did we gain from it? We see people walking and cycling. We see people taking up baking. We see people having more family dinners. We see these small changes that are kind of cool. Not having traffic has allowed me to walk to work and not feel like I'm going to be, taken on by all the cars in the world. So there's really something neat about it. And if we can embrace what's really neat about it, that might bring us into this really positive future that blends some of the old good stuff and some of the new good. And then we arrive at something even better.
Mm. And for a lot of folks, you mentor a lot of young women who come out of university and are entering the workforce. But there are folks who have experienced job loss now. And what advice would you have for those who are recently graduated, trying to navigate a job market predominantly online or in frontline positions, or those who have lost jobs that are trying to rebuild confidence and reapply or upskill and switch industries? From an HR perspective, from a leadership perspective, what advice do you have for these folks who are in transition and trying to navigate what that next right step is?
It's a good time to be in transition in a way because we all accept each other's transitions. So if you show up at an interview and you say, well, I'm in transition, there's kind of an acceptance of that, maybe more than there had been before. And, it had to be, your career had to be linear in some way. This changes that linear path, and that might be good for everyone. So if I was a young person, like coming out of university or college and thinking, okay, what's next for me and how do I create that? There are a lot of resources out there to rely on. And it really is important that people turn to all the possibilities of, let's go to LinkedIn. I get a connection every single day that someone says, hey, how can you help connect me to someone or to something? And it doesn't mean that I can do that directly with them, but I try to provide them with a connection, like talk to this person, or, most of us have a network of people like you and I who are willing to offer some form of, coaching or networking. So I would really say to the person looking is not to be discouraged, which is silly because how do you not get discouraged if you're out of work? However, it's, you write down your path and your goals. Who do I know? Who can help me? Ask for help. When someone offers help, accept it. Email everyone you know and say, I need your help. Say the words, I need your help. I'm looking for work. This is what I can bring to it. I used to have these skills, whatever those skills were. I used to be in hospitality. That gave me, good customer management skills, and hospitality is in hiring right now. What can you do for me? How can you open a door for me? Do you know someone at this company or that company? And what I've noticed is when people ask for help, they get it. And secondly, I know I referred to LinkedIn, but I want to be really specific about this. Connections on LinkedIn are quite easy and free. And what's the downside to connecting with someone saying, hi, you don't know me and you're the CEO and I'm out of work, but can we talk? I have conversations all the time with people that are looking for work, and it opens a door. So even if you're a shy person, you can still ask your parents for help. You can ask your neighbors. You can ask everyone and take it, just be bold, really bold. And that transformation will come.
This reminds me of the energy that you shared of those early days in the business, of the asking for help and asking for what you need. And then again, after the loss of Tony, reaching out to your community. And so for those who are watching, don't be afraid to ask for what you need. Don't be afraid to ask for the support that you're looking for. And something I'll share here too, I read the book Option B by Sheryl Sandberg after the loss of her husband. And she shared that, and Adam Grant, her co-author, they shared that after any significant trauma or loss, which is similar to the pandemic we're experiencing, it's normal for folks to lose their confidence and sense of self because such a big part of your life has been shaken. So as you take your next steps forward, that confidence will rebuild. And so in your own life, because again, this parallel for me, it's so evident in my life of like the difficulty I navigated with my illness in my 20s and what we're facing now. It's just the difference for me is that we're all experiencing this together so people can relate to each other. Whereas when I was sick, there was so few people I could talk to about it that it was even more isolating. So the community aspect of knowing that we're all living this together has been a little bit of a silver lining for me. But when it comes to your toolkit personally, that keeps you resilient daily, as you navigate the difficulty that you've been facing in pivoting your own business and pivoting your own way that you show up at home, What are those non-negotiables for you as a leader that you've had to prioritize to stay well during this time?
Hmm. Well, a lot of that is about accepting who we are, isn't it? And, for me, I love to climb into bed early. And, I've had to work a little bit harder on creating, better sleep habits, which I'm sure sounds, like really, but for
It's
me,
so
having better,
important.
it's
Sleep
so
is so
important.
important.
Yeah, how you feel on a day-to-day basis is, did you sleep well last night? And if we could all just rate our sleep from the night before, would rate the success of our day. And so another non-negotiable for me is I do write down what I'm going to achieve the next day in a way that's reasonable. I don't put demands on myself that are extremely unreasonable as much as I can. I try to kind of segment my time and try to give one thing my full attention and be present to it for that period of time, which is always a challenge for everyone because there's so many competing priorities. But if you can stay in that present space, and I really do try to do that. And I also try to measure myself with a little bit of fairness on how did I do from point A to point B today. That was a small habit. You know that book Atomic Habits, it's like that 1% more that day. I'm okay to say I did 1% more, or I had a small impact today. My small impact was having a meaningful conversation with a colleague or, a job seeker. And it wasn't a big impact, but it mattered. And the series of continuous small impacts ends up leading to something larger. So that instead of measuring myself by, did I make a massive gain? I'm not Sheryl Sandberg, or Oprah Winfrey. So, those big, big gains, I made little gains, but the series of continuous little gains really does end up mattering. And so I try not to get down on those. And the non-negotiable is leading with gratitude. When I do wake up, like my mother said, get up, and reface your day with a new start, is when I start my day and think, oh, today is going to be hard. And someone is sad and someone else is in pain, or maybe I'm in pain because my children have a pain, or and I'm owning someone else's pain, is really, going to that place of gratitude. And I know gratitude is an overdone word too, and I'm not trying to be false gratitude. I mean, if you really think like, what today are you grateful for? It could be the smallest thing. I'm grateful today that I met you because now I know you in the future. Or maybe I'm grateful for the sun that was shining and I had a great opportunity to have a walk. Or it doesn't matter. It could be just the littlest smile, or, my daughter dancing, and I'm just taking joy in that. So it's like, whatever it is that the gratitude doesn't have to be big. It can be little. So when you're starting that day thinking, I'm pretty down on myself because things aren't working for me, but somewhere there's someone that loves you, and somewhere there's gratitude there. And if you can find the gratitude and that love, you're going to come on top of the rest of it, right?
Mm-hmm. And
I
it's
imagine for you too.
it's a constant practice with gratitude, because I go through those phases where I think, oh my goodness, like this is overblown, like this isn't going to make you feel better. But then when I sit down and I pick the moments, like the seconds in a day that changed things or that brought me full presence, and I look back on them, I can remember so much more with so much more fullness in my heart and in my experience. And it does, it makes leading a team or being a better partner so much easier on the hard days.
Yes.
So as we bring our time to a close, I want to, as us millennials, or maybe it's the Gen Zs who say, give you your flowers as someone who has led a company for 30 years during a time when female founders and women founders were few and far between, building a company to one that has over 140 million in revenue annually, that is a national company. These are huge milestones to be celebrated. And that is a big part of why this was, we were brought together for today's CEO talk, is to celebrate your achievements and celebrate what you've built over 30 years, how you've changed the HR landscape through the company and your team in Canada. And so as you reflect on that, I mean, it's incremental change over time. It's not like one day you wake up and it's everything that you've built. But it's always nice to pause and reflect. How do you feel when you reflect back on what you and Tony built together, what you were able to help even enhance further in the last 5 years with the business and with your entire team? What is that like for you to reflect on?
Well, I am proud of my achievements when it comes to, seeking to be a really good employer and seeking to be an impactful community leader. And more importantly, to be a great mom. I mean, those are the critical things in my life. But I can't say that I always stop and pat myself on the back, because I usually wake up and think, oh, I didn't do this yet and I need to achieve this today. So, like, I don't know that anyone ever feels like they've arrived.
Mhm.
And I know that we've said before that success is not linear. And so I really do believe that. It's like one day I think, oh, I've done really well and I'm so proud of my achievements. And then the next day I'm thinking, my goodness, I've failed in these 10 ways and I need to really bring something new to this. And when I have a problem, I always, look to dissect it to see what I can bring to it that's something new and changed. So I am proud of my achievements, and thank you so much for your kind words and giving me the virtual flowers. I'll take them. But I don't know that I really rest on that. I have a big future ahead, and I really want to look to the future as much as possible. And Tony's part of that future. My team's part of the future. My children, and that's what I'm out to create, is what that future looks like.
Well, I'm glad we could make a little moment of pause to celebrate. And we did have one audience question come in. So before I throw to Suling, I'm going to ask one more question. And it's a little bit tactical around how we work now in this reality to improve wellness in the workplace. And some ways that I've seen organizations do this have included increasing mental health budgets for folks so that therapy becomes more possible, being more flexible with work times, as you shared with mothers. But what are some other tactics that can support leaders as they're navigating the wellness of their teams during this time?
Thank you for the question. That's a very impactful one. We're working on this continuously as well, and I would refer you to our blog on emotional health. There are some steps that we've outlined there. One, I would say, would be increasing communication and never thinking communication is too much. Like overdoing communication right now is okay, and saying what you don't know. Like, I don't know what the post-pandemic organization will look like. However, I will say that for 2021, this is where we are. So creating that clarity so that the person isn't uncertain, the employee or the employer is not uncertain. So creating as much as you can as an employer, and then creating intentional touch points for the leaders that sometimes people feel forgotten at home. And if the touch point is intentional, then that is a game changer, because I could forget to call you for 3 weeks, right? But if you were in my calendar and scheduled, and there was a reason to have a conversation, even if it's just to say hello, are you okay today? How's today? It doesn't have to be a big performance conversation. It can just be, hey, what are we up to today? And I think making more room for that. So in our company, I'd say emotional health, we've increased our use of our EAP. We have brought in experts to do quarterly, either personal things like cooking classes, like online. We're encouraging fitness at any time of the day. We don't care if you're pausing at any time of day. Something I'm doing, I didn't answer this before, but at 3:00, my daughter does gym classes. So I've been doing them with her from 3 to 3:30. So I book it in my calendar and I try to do some kind of fitness. And sometimes I show up to my business meeting in my yoga clothes, even interviews. I'm like, oh, I'm a little embarrassed, but I prioritize getting some kind of movement in for the day anyway. So this emotional health, I think, is around communicating as often and as openly as possible, and acknowledging that, we read all the time, it's okay not to be okay. And it is okay. To say I'm having a really rough day, and someone else brings something to you that brings you to your next, let's get back on board together and let's create something, with that. And we have increased our overall use of encouraging, please use your health days, please use flex time, please take vacation. We're really asking our employees to schedule time off, because we're seeing people, why would I take time off? I don't have anywhere to go. But what if there's a staycation that could be fun, or something around your home? So really trying to encourage people to separate from work.
It's so important. Absolutely. And even just respecting people when they are on time off, because I've heard a lot of people reach out to me about this. My employers aren't respecting my boundaries because they know I'm still at home. And it's like,
yes,
we need to be better as leaders in this way too.
And to set the example.
And to set the example, take time off ourselves and respect the time off when our teams take it. But Kathryn, thank you so much for today's conversation. It's been so wonderful to connect, to learn more about your story and to dive deeper. Thank you for the takeaways for us of asking for help when we need it, throughout all different phases of our journeys, reminding us of the importance of wellness and gratitude. It's been such a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much.
And thank you. And thank you for everything you've brought to resilience in your career. And we're so proud of you and your achievements, as a Ottawa, community driver as well. It's really nice to meet you.
Thank you so much, Kathryn.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll throw over to Suling for today's closing remarks.
Thank you both so much. Thank you seems like an understatement. What a powerful conversation. And I think that you hit on so many topics that are valuable to us as leaders and as business people and as women. And so I'm very grateful. And I hate to contradict you, Kathryn, but I do believe that you and Komal both are in the same leagues as Sheryl Sandberg and Oprah Winfrey. And you have made as much of a difference in different ways. And we're very grateful that you dedicated your time to our community today through this conversation. And we look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Suling.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, as we move on to the closing of our event, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I know I will be rewatching that conversation many times, and I took copious notes. So there was some really fundamental mindset training there and some tactical work that we could be doing as well. So really grateful to have that expertise. Thank you again to our sponsors for making today possible, to Algonquin College and also to Oakwood Builders and Designers. It is only with the support of our sponsors that we are able to bring this kind of expertise and inspiration to you. So we're very grateful. Thank you. That word grateful again. Before we leave this afternoon, I'd like to remind you of some upcoming events. We have our very popular Mayor's Breakfast coming up this Friday, March the 26th, and continuing on with this theme of Powerful Women's Month, a conversation with Lisa Raitt and Catherine Clark. I encourage you to join us at 7:30 for our virtual Zoom networking. We're getting great numbers out and having a lot of great conversations, meeting up with new people virtually. And then our live stream is at 8 o'clock. The next Mayor's Breakfast, if you want to save the date, is on April the 29th. And we'll be having a conversation with Cameron Love from the Ottawa Hospital, and of course our own Mark Sutcliffe, who always has a great conversation as well. And again, it'll start with networking, followed by the virtual live stream. And then we're really excited and hope you can save the date for our City Building Summit. This is an event that we hosted the inaugural event in 2019. Last year was canceled due to COVID, but we're looking forward to a virtual one this year. City building, of course, is the process of creating a thriving city, and we invite all community and business leaders to join us. We have some fantastic keynote speakers coming up, updates on some of the most important projects happening in Ottawa, and some interactive work that we'll be doing on key economic issues. So please save the date for that and join us. If you need any details, you can visit ottawabot.ca or obj.ca for all of these events and more information on the work that we're doing overall. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope to connect with you again soon. Have a great day.